Hey everyone, and welcome to my review for House of the Dragon Season 3 Episode 6, Faceless Men. Okay, so where to start with this one? Like always, there were highs and lows, but as the season goes on, I'm finding each episode increasingly slow. There were some major developments in this one, but even that felt anticlimactic and uninspired. That's not to say this was a terrible episode. It's always well shot and acted, and there were definitely some good scenes, but it's hard to get excited about anything other than the battles at this point, and those don't come along very often. Now let's get to the positives of the episode, starting with the small council meeting where they seem to have a productive discussion about how to handle Ormond Hightower, with everyone making good points as Daemon wanted to burn them out with dragonfire, while the others wanted to wait for the army to avoid indiscriminately killing innocents. It was also kind of cool seeing Daemon dismiss the opinions of the nobles Manderly and Frey because they're not warriors, but then actively debate the commoner Alan of Hull, since he very much is a warrior, meaning that despite his social class, Daemon sees him as someone deserving respect. And to my surprise, I actually think Rhaenyra handled this meeting fairly well, and made reasonable decisions, including preventing Daemon going to Tumbleton to instead deal with the gold cloak issue in the city. There was also something pretty heartbreaking about this conversation, and spoilers here for those who haven't read the books, but it seems like Rhaenyra and her people are really holding back and going to all these lengths to avoid civilian deaths at Tumbleton, only for all these precautions to prove meaningless since the events of that battle become legendary for their brutality, with maesters describing the aftermath as the most cruel and savage sack in the history of the Seven Kingdoms. Later in the episode, as Rhaenyra once again failed to properly address the petitions of the small folk, we finally see her cut herself on the throne, which according to tradition means she's been deemed unworthy to rule. Then there was the Baratheon delegation delaying their commitment to Rhaenyra after previously delaying their commitment to the Greens, which seems to indicate that they're waiting to see what happens and who gains the greater advantage before fully joining one side or the other. They then mention that Lord Boros is off fighting the Vulture King in the south, which is also what he was doing in the books throughout much of the war. Some other good scenes included Ulf revealing to Hugh his dissatisfaction with his position as a dragon rider, Rhaenyra correctly scolding Alicent for once again trying to escape and confining Helaena despite her mother's protests, the Goldcloaks resigning due to a lack of pay and the dangers of their job, Alan's discussion with Corlys asking for more men for the capital, Tywin Lannister burying the man Aegon killed before they ultimately decide to follow the advice of Larys Strong and go to Essos, and Gwaine Hightower reaching Tumbleton and proving his worth to the arrogant Lord Ormond Hightower, providing necessary support and wise counsel for the continued war against the Queen. Moving on to the negatives, I'll start with Ms. Arya proving increasingly useless as the episodes go on. At first, she actually seemed like a good advisor and source of information, but lately she hasn't really been offering much help and is now actively hiding things from the Queen she's supposed to believe in, all because she was manipulated by Alicent Hightower after a 1-minute conversation. It actually would have been much more impressive if she had approached Alicent and offered to keep Helena's secret in exchange for goodwill with the Greens, in case she might need their help in the future. When I think of her compared to Varys or Littlefinger in terms of underhanded shadow brokers, she really isn't very impressive. Next there's Daemon's treatment of Ulf the White, as his abuse and casual dismissal of this pivotal military asset makes absolutely no sense, especially considering that warfare is the only area where Daemon excels. I've mentioned this before, but it made much more sense in the books where Daemon was their greatest advocate, trying to convince Rhaenyra to give Hugh and Ulf greater rewards, like the castles Rosby and Stokeworth. And when that was refused, he suggested destroying the houses Lannister and Baratheon to give them Casterly Rock and Storm's End. Then there was Hugh reuniting with his wife. I get why she was mad at him, but it came off as utterly ridiculous she wouldn't jump at the opportunity to leave the city which is preparing for war, and where her brother was already killed by the leadership. The only justification is that she may not want to leave without the rest of her family, but instead of setting that as a condition for leaving, she just got mad and walked away. Over in King's Landing, it seems absolutely crazy to me that Rhaenyra would send Alicent to assassinate Aemon. It reminds me of when Otto Hightower scolded Aegon and Criston Cole for sending Auric Cargyle to impersonate his brother and assassinate Rhaenyra. Otto derisively called it a prank, and that's all I could think of when she mentioned this. How could she think this prank would ever work? Outside the capital, I found it a bit too unbelievable Boljon Roxton, the top soldier for Ormond at Tumbleton, was able to leave the town with enough men to defeat the Valyrian soldiers and capture Corlys so quickly and with so much ease. I guess Hugh didn't see them cause he was distracted by visiting his wife, but even so, how were the Valyrians caught so off guard? Don't they have perimeter scouts? Don't they have a lot of men since they hadn't had time to leave for the capital yet? In the books, Corlys does eventually end up a prisoner of the Greens, but the circumstances are very different and much more believable. I've liked Ormond's storyline so far, but this seemed a bit much. Then of course there's Rhaena in the Vale getting slapped around by Lady Jane Eyre. This just seemed completely pointless other than to remind us she's still around. I think it's safe to say this is my least favorite storyline in the show. And finally, I want to mention the romance between Alan of Hall and his niece Baela Targaryen, which for me was not in any way properly set up. Although they do end up together in the books, that happens years later under very different circumstances. I actually don't have a problem with them presenting that relationship now, but they didn't do any build up for it. We only saw them have one conversation prior to this, and just last week it seemed like she had more chemistry with Adam of Hall. In my opinion, they should have shown them getting closer every episode, and built it up more gradually. So now let's get into my top 5 moments of the night, starting with the death of Criston Cole in the Butcher's Ball. Okay, so first of all I have to admit there was a lot I disliked about this scene. Like how Cole had so few men, which made the line about dead on both sides make little sense. How this was all at the beginning of the episode and felt like an anticlimactic throwaway scene. How the entire trap of leaving men in disguise made no sense since they vastly outnumbered Cole's men and could have lured them into the trap with actual dead bodies instead of sacrificing soldiers. And how they butchered some of the best lines and didn't even include the most pivotal one they set up in the last episode, where after Cole is shot, one of them should say, "I'll have no songs about how brave you died, Kingmaker. There's tens of thousands dead on your account." Which would have perfectly followed Cole expressing his desire to die gloriously and be remembered in song. However, even with all that said, I'm grateful they at least tried to make his death similar to the books, and made the actual moment of his death with the 3 arrows quite impactful. I didn't mind that it was only Roddy the Ruin and the Tully Boy instead of the characters from the books, and I actually think changing Red Rob Rivers as the killer of Criston Cole to Alicent Black Alley Blackwood was a good idea, as she'll be important in the future and they're doing a decent job of slowly introducing her to the audience. I can't say the scene was done as well as it could have been, but at least they tried. So to me, putting this as number 5 in my top moments basically feels like giving them a participation trophy, as it definitely could have been worse. Moving on to the number 4 spot, I went with Aemond One-Eye and Alice Rivers finally starting their relationship, which successfully sets up some very interesting future events. Although I like getting a glimpse into their relationship, which is not detailed in the books, my favorite part of this scene was when Alice pulled out the dragon eggs and gave Aemond a history lesson about Rhaena Targaryen, the Black Bride and Queen of the West and East, who was the daughter of King Aenys and granddaughter of Aegon the Conqueror. Undergoing many hardships in her life, she claimed the dragon Dreamfire, currently held by Helaena, and started as the wife of her brother Aegon, who should have been heir to the Iron Throne, except that their uncle Maegor the Cruel took the throne by force after the death of his brother. One of the worst kings in their history, Maegor killed Aegon during a civil war, and Rhaena was taken as one of Maegor's wives. After the death of Maegor, Rhaena helped her brother Jaehaerys secure the Iron Throne, before moving to Fair Isle, where she lived for a time until she felt unwelcome. And so she moved to Casterly Rock, where she felt they only wanted to use her, and so again moved to Dragonstone, where she was happy until betrayed by her best friend who stole 3 dragon eggs, and husband who had grown resentful and killed her friends before killing himself. To make matters worse, her daughter Arya ran away and flew Balerion the Blackdread into the east, only to return with a terrible disease that killed her. Heartsick, Rhaena made Harrenhal her final home, where she lived as a guest of House Towers until her death. For the third best moment, I chose the Gwaine Hightower and Daeron Targaryen scenes, as it was nice seeing them have a close relationship, and how they both recognize Ormond is a bit psychotic, revealing that Gwaine often protected Daeron when they were all at Old Town. These were small scenes, but I've come to enjoy Gwaine and Daeron's characters, and it was nice seeing them interact. At the number 2 spot, I went with Daemon's gold cloak deception after many of his men resigned their posts, and so he posed as one of them to lure out an attacker. After a brief interrogation where it was made clear there are many more Hightower loyalists in the city, Daemon killed the man, which may have been a mistake since taking him in for a more thorough interrogation may have been the wiser choice. And now for the best moment of the episode, I went with Rhaenyra sending soldiers in Baratheon gear to assassinate Daeron Targaryen. Unlike sending Alicent to kill Aemond, I thought this was actually well played for the most part, as it came very close to working. The only change I would have made is not having the leader of the delegation pose as the son of Boros Baratheon, since there's a good chance he may be known and can be recognized by someone. I would have had them come as maybe lesser known Baratheons or a non-blood related representative, so they had a better chance at getting away with the ruse. But even so, this led to a pretty great fight scene where Gwaine proved his worth to Ormond and Bold John Roxton cut a guy open from belly to groin. Very cool scene. For the best kill of the episode, I went with the death of Criston Cole. Although a lot of the scene could have been better, the actual death of Cole was pretty perfect, with Black Ali casually shooting him with 3 arrows, denying him the epic, glorious death he so craved. And for the best line of the night, I'll stay at the Butcher's Ball, and go with some of the only lines they actually quoted correctly, when the soldier asks, "Who are they?" and Cole replies, "Our death." So that's it for my review of House of the Dragon Season 3 Episode 6, Faceless Men. This was another hit or miss episode for me, with some scenes I liked and others not so much. But overall, it's going a bit too slow for my liking, and they're focusing on too many storylines I'm not interested in. So I'm gonna give this episode a 6 out of 10. But what did you all think? How do you think they handled the death of Criston Cole? Do you think Ormond and his men are being portrayed as too cunning and powerful? And what do you think of Rhaenyra sending Alicent to kill Aemond? Let me know in the comments below, and if you haven't already, be sure to check out my Prelude to the House of the Dragon Season 3 video, along with my other A Song of Ice and Fire videos like the complete histories of Hugh Hammer and Ulf the White, the Second Riverlands campaign, Criston Cole, and Adam Valerion. I'll link all those and more in the comments below, and remember to watch my regular Sunday lore videos, which will focus on the Dance of the Dragons until the end of the season, along with my weekly reviews for the show. So for now, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. A special thanks to all those who contribute to CivilizationEx, like Warden of the X, Spectral Knight, Lord Commander of the Eternal Legion, Sir Loin, Werebear of the Great North, Sir Elendil of Numenor, and Javenya Targaryen. If you'd like to help the channel, be sure to give a like, leave a comment, subscribe, and click on the links below, or else go to patreon.com/CivilizationEx, where you can gain early access to videos and watch the Patreon-only series, Heroes of Lore and Legend.